Hey everyone, I'm Valentina Flores, CEO of Red Sentry, and this is the Ctrl-Alt-Secure podcast where we talk about all things cybersecurity. And we often on this podcast talk about proactivity, jumping ahead of the hackers, but at the end of the day, the odds are that you will get hacked or you will suffer a cyber attack. So I wanted to bring Samir Black on today to talk about when that happens, what do we do? Because I think there's this huge mystery around incident response until unfortunately you've been through it. So Samir Black with Data Pros Consulting is here today to talk to us about incident response, what to do in case you are the victim of a breach, and how to best prepare for that potentially inevitable situation. So Samir, if you want to tell us just a little bit about your background and your current role.
Absolutely. Thank you, Valentina. So, Samir Black. My background is I've been in the tech industry for coming up on 12 years now. I've been doing security for 5. And now I found my way into the incident response game, where we're looking at a lot of really interesting cases where people are getting hacked, compromised in a lot of different ways. Been working with Fortune 500 primarily, just working medical field, legal and professional, and kind of supporting different types of like architecture and infrastructure. I have a really strong background in Azure itself, doing solutions architecting and security architecting, building controls for companies around that stuff. And now I'm out here trying to be the hero for a lot of companies.
You know, it's funny, like incident response is really important to me personally, just because I come from law enforcement and being a detective, and I was kind of so over the reactivity of it. And so I kind of jumped the opposite direction. And that's when I came to the private sector and now I'm doing proactive. But you have to have people there reacting. So that's why we partner with companies like yours. There has to be someone there for when that happens, those subject matter experts. So I think incident response is so undervalued and underrated. So I'm glad we're doing this today. So let's start like with a cyber attack. It happens after a breach. How does incident response typically kick in?
So a lot of the times, depending on the owner and the existing setup, it becomes a bit of a mystery for a lot of these people. It's like, what's happening? Okay, well, we can't reach the server. This piece of software isn't working as expected. So you have kind of a gap as a business owner on like, what's actually happening to my business? And then you reach out to the tech people that you know. What's happening? Maybe I have some sort of IT representation. Okay, well, this isn't working. Can you figure it out? And to be honest, a lot of the time that like generic first level IT group that you may have doesn't understand what's happening. So then you have to go a step above, find more and more people until you finally find that ransom note. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, who's actually capable of dealing with this? And it's not just us. It becomes a group of people that ends up being a part of this whole series of events. You have your legal counsel, you have your ransomware negotiator, and then your actual incident response that comes in on the ground and actually deals with the business continuity issues. Like, are you guys still able to operate? What's up with your database? Let's get you back operating so you're not losing money while also dealing with this ransomware attack.
Yeah, and what I've seen in the past too is like there's this phase of like finger pointing sometimes before we even jump into the
Yeah.
actual containment. And it's like, let's just stop the spread. Like, let's contain it. Then we can investigate the scope and like where the breach came in. But there's so often this like finger pointing. And, you know, I was the victim of ransomware back in a different career. And it was just wild the way incident response didn't kick in fast enough. But I think that's where like being prepared for these conversations is such an important part of this, obviously. So as far as detecting these incidents as soon as possible, because obviously that delay in kicking in the response, what are best practices for identifying those breaches as soon as possible?
So as a business owner, if you notice things stop working, right? Like your computer and stuff is operational, but when you notice critical business functionalities actually just stop, I would feel very anxious. I would start to like think about what is my disaster recovery plan? Like where are the things that matter to moving forward with this, right? And then at that point, I would start asking the important questions about my major services that I have that are hosted on servers. And at that point, I would try and see or have someone find, is there a ransomware note? I would be very active on that until it's either been identified or cleared that it's not there.
Yeah, and like you were talking about earlier with the not knowing who's responsible for what, I think that's like a huge piece of the puzzle is once you recognize that a breach may or may not be happening, like
Mhm.
knowing your role in that. And I'm sure we'll talk about like tabletops and simulations and things like that later, but that's also a huge piece in like responding as quickly as possible. I mean, speed is like the name of this game, right? Like how fast you can.
Absolutely. There's a set deadline for them on when they're going to release your data. If it's happened, they're already determined when it's coming out. And at that point, it's just a matter of like, what are you going to do between now and then? How are you going to deal with the negotiation aspect of it? What are you going to do to start bringing your business back up and quantifying the loss at the same time? This is definitely an insurance claim moment.
So once that's contained and once you've kind of settled a little bit, maybe the ransom's done, maybe it's not, I don't know. But how do you help companies avoid these issues in the future? Because you're not just like a one stop, hey, see
No.
ya. Like what happens after that?
So that's a really good point. We care a lot about the future of the businesses we work with. A lot of the times we do come into very poor environments. And I'm not saying poor in the sense that the business itself isn't wealthy, but they tend to have a lot of tech debt. And in those situations, it's not acceptable for us to just walk away without providing them some sense of like future scoping. So in those situations, what we'll do is we'll write out a security journey for them, things that need to happen immediately, things that can happen within the next quarter, and then things that need to happen in the next year. And a lot of the times, it'll be a lot of really easy fixes at the beginning. And then as you push things out deadline wise, they do become a little bit more expensive. Like we need to fix where your networking equipment exists. You know, it's exposed to things that it shouldn't be exposed to. And that just gives too much risk. But like when you're talking about redoing a networking closet for a lot of businesses, that's really expensive and they have to find room for it. And if they're managing all of that hardware themselves, they need to come up to standards for that. So it's mostly just identifying what can be done immediately and cheaply, and then getting them to start to see the vision of security integrated into their workplace, and then preaching that culture to them in a way where it's top down from the business owner to the rest of the staff.
Yeah, I like the word they use that you guys call it like a security journey because I think so often people consider security as like yes or no, the box is checked. And it's not at all. It is a journey, it's a roadmap. You should have the current things that we can do right now. And we've been in startup mode. It's not always as easy as it sounds on paper, but there's things that you can do right now and then things that you can strive to do next quarter, next year. And you're never done with your security journey.
No, no. But
And
I mean, there's definitely a lot of big things. And the most important thing is deal with the low hanging fruit. I
yeah.
can't say that enough. Deal with the low hanging fruit because when people get attacked, they're looking for the low hanging fruit. They're looking for, okay, well, what's your FortiGate version? You know, like let's figure out how we can make sure these pieces of technology that we think are helping us are actually going to end up helping us.
Yeah, we have people ask us all the time about like this 0-day exploit that was just discovered yesterday. And it's like, listen, let's patch up some known vulnerabilities first. Let's make sure your passwords aren't all over the dark web. There's these baby steps, and we so often try to like jump to these more extensive hacks and these crazy breaches, but we're not doing this, like you said, the low hanging fruit. And you mentioned tech debt, and there's so many companies that aren't putting in time into their sprints for maintenance and security, and those things have to be added into your sprint time, or when you suffer an attack, well, more likely to suffer an attack, and then when you are, the infrastructure is just not ready for it. So I'd love for companies to really start looking at, even if it's starting at like an hour or so a sprint and then kind of building up from there to really tackle that tech debt and that security stuff.
The culture that I've noticed for that is suffered since the pandemic. And by that, I mean, most businesses are so hyper focused with AI now that it's such a challenge to get them to grow in a positive direction where they can focus on tech debt instead of the future. And it's hard to steer business owners away from things that seem very profitable. But
Yeah.
it's like, I'm excited for you on these cool new things that, you know, oh, I can type this and it'll write me an article. But like, dude, you have like so many vulnerabilities that are existing in your environment. I mean, like, I would love for your business to exist for the next 10 years. So let's have it exist instead of continuously exposing it to things that don't need to be exposed to.
And like you said, it's the culture of it, because like when I'm in investor meetings or talking to clients and they're like, what's coming up on the roadmap? Like tech debt is not a fun roadmap item.
It's just like, it doesn't say profit, right? But the
Right.
thing is like dealing with it makes everything less expensive. when you deal with your problems head on, you have a better environment, you have a better place to work, and your company's culture is not just better, it's stronger. You have the resilience as a group. And that's the thing. I like to say this because to me, it's one of the most important things. Everyone's job is security. Everyone's, which means everyone is responsible for the tech debt that involves security. So if you don't care about tech debt, you don't care about security.
Yeah, and I think half of our job on the sales side is convincing people to pay for this proactive solution. And it's just ransomware doesn't show up on the budget sheet until it shows up on the budget sheet. And it's just convincing people like, listen, you are vulnerable. You are likely to experience a cyber attack. And I think there's this idea of like, it won't happen to us, and it will. It probably already has. There's probably a hacker somewhere in your system, guys. There's something there.
The best way I found to quantify that for a lot of business owners is that they're after a direct number of your revenue. They're looking for something between 2 to 7% of your revenue to steal from you. And if that information is available publicly, they're going to abuse it. We've seen situations where it wasn't available publicly because the business was so small. So it was like a small time hacker that kind of just picked it up for like, hey, let me just steal 10K from you.
Right.
And we've seen it where it was like 1.5 million. Those are real numbers. And the situation comes out to like, well, would you rather spend 1.5 million annually? Because they're not going to stop after they get in.
That's another big misconception.
You're going to be a repeat customer for them. Thanks for shopping here at Ransomware.
It's time for your renewal.
The thing is, most businesses don't understand that they could actually end up protecting their business and having better security and technical infrastructure if they just spent 0.1 to 0.5% of the revenue on technology annually. Like, that's a very comfortable number for us technologists to be able to support most businesses in a very effective way. And that includes the cyber insurance, that includes the MSP or, internal tech team, the MSSP or the secure or your SecOps team. And on top of that, for project work, like dealing with the tech debt, you can accomplish all of that between 0.1 to 0.5% of your revenue without essentially creating an option or an insurance plan on yourself and making sure that you're paying your due diligence to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen, and to make sure that you prove to your investors, to your employees, to everyone that you care about technology and security. It's something that I can't stop preaching. It's super important and super easy to do. Like, if you just say, I'm gonna set this little bit of money aside to deal with these problems, you're gonna be in a lot better position, because the reality is you're at risk for 2 to 7%. And to be honest, it's been a running 5% for the ones that we've seen lately. They're not going for the lower numbers anymore. They're reaching higher. And because of that, it sucks. It's like, do I just want to lose that every year?
Yeah, we saw a startup this past year, and they were pre-sales, so they didn't even have revenue, and they were hit for $3 million. And it's like, because why not? Hacking has become so automated that I can throw an exploit out and hit hundreds or thousands of companies at once. And it's just changed the nature of who is a victim and who's a potential target. And there's no such thing as being too small or we're not profitable yet, so they won't hit us. That doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, if you can tell, Samir and I are on our soapbox. We're pretty passionate about this kind of stuff. But so I guess when you're responding to incidents, what are some common mistakes you're seeing companies make that, other companies could learn from? What are your lessons learned on those?
Checking to see your role-based access controls. Go into your AD, intra, whatever you're doing for identity management, double check who has the privileges. Are those highly privileged accounts secure? Do they have MFA on them? Because honestly, what's going to end up happening is you're going to have someone come in through some sort of means, and they're going to look to see who is the privileged accounts and can we compromise those now that we're in the systems. That's the first thing they're going to do, because that's the easiest way for them to level themselves up. Outside of that, they're going to try and get access to certain pieces of your server that's relevant. And from there, it's okay, well, we need to start doing patches, right? Make sure you're patching your servers. Those things are the things that they're going to try and exploit. And what is it? Patch Tuesday is once a week. Go learn what's in your systems. Go figure out what are the pieces that are going to be exploitable for you. And having technologists like represent that in the form of like an IT team or an MSP is critical, especially on a weekly basis for a lot of businesses, to like make sure they're keeping up with the things that are going to make sure that they don't get exploited on. But yeah, for me, start with your role-based access controls. Go see if you have any loose admin accounts that were created for like some service purpose and get rid of them.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. The privilege escalation and just, jumping up that chain. And then I think also like communication is like a huge piece of it that we see companies making that mistake, is just like no one's or they're talking inefficiently. I don't know. There's just like very poor communication back and forth, and the message gets mixed up between, like you said, there are like 10 different parties involved in this conversation. Yeah. So that's a big piece. And then the patch management, I mean, that's so huge, especially like from our side. We talked about like expensive pieces of the security journey, but like vulnerability scanning, whether you're using our tool or someone else's, I mean, there's so many out there, they're not that expensive. And that can at least give you a base of, all right, I have 4 high vulnerabilities, 10 mediums, 100 lows, whatever. Like this week, I'm just going to tackle like this high vulnerability. And it kind of gives you that prioritization, and you don't have to tackle everything all at once. It'll probably never be completely cleared. But like, you just got to start somewhere. So you got to set that up in your goals and your OKRs and KPIs. There's ways to kind of incentivize tackling that stuff. So yeah, patch management is huge. And then I guess talking about like the vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, like obviously incident response is reactive, and then my side of the house is more proactive. So can you talk about how those two kind of work together?
Absolutely. So I love it when you guys are in ahead of time. It makes things so much easier for us, especially during like the discovery aspect of things. So if you are a business that, wants to make sure you at least have some sense of representation ahead of time, say you want to start building towards a security standard, right? And the thing is, you still might get hacked. Let's be realistic. There's still opportunity for you to get hacked, even if you're at that point. Your cost of our incident response is severely reduced once you have predetermined a lot of your security issues and have actually started working on them. If you've done pen testing, if you've done a security standard like NIST 800, those are the pieces that will help you build an environment that's going to make you more secure and more difficult for the bad actors to do what they do in your environment. And even if you do get hacked, when time comes for us to come in, like it's a lot cheaper for the business owner, like significantly, like we're talking zeros at the end of the check.
And it probably cuts that response time down.
Oh yes,
dramatically.
We're able to like come in, and honestly, a lot of the times, especially if they have like a good security team in place or a process in place where they've done the due diligence ahead of time, we're probably in and out within a day.
Wow. Yeah. And, we mentioned cyber insurance, like all of these things work side by side. Like it seems like completely different sides of the house, but like, I mean, that's why all of our partners, all of our companies like partner with each other, is because, everyone's a subject matter expert in their specific area, but we know that those other pieces are important to it. So critical. They work better if they are side by side, like not in a vacuum. So it's all one ecosystem, I guess. I hate the word like synergy, but it is like, it's just like this synergy, security ecosystem, it works much better, everything flowing together.
And a lot of the time people confuse certain needs of their business. Like they think they're okay with just having an MSP. They don't bother with the cybersecurity insurance. They don't bother with the managed security service providers either. And at that point, they just assume that the MSP is handling everything. That's wrong. And the thing is, like, it's frustrating because it's like, well, what the hell am I paying this MSP for? Well, the thing is, you're paying them to deal with your regular technology needs, not necessarily your security needs.
Right.
Their technology is so deep as far as a topic. And the problem is that most business owners are frustrated because of its complexity, because of how expensive it is, and how much it eats into their profits. And the thing is, like, it's such an important part of how you make money, how you interact with your clients, how you actually deal and, grow internally. Every employee needs a computer now for a lot of the things that they do. They need an email account. They have an identity that serves a purpose somewhere. And the thing is, like, if you are not looking over that, if you are not managing that on every relevant perspective, you are going to be exposed. You are going to like get compromised in a way that's uncomfortable. And when you look at like why MSPs are like not everything, it's because the packages that they present, the things that they have as far as software only can do so much. And
Right.
it's a very complex world. And that's why, pen testing is so important. That's why, making sure you have the cybersecurity insurance or an MSSP group looking over that. Because the thing is, if there isn't like a set of logs for someone like me to look at, we have to do very frustrating forensics work. We have
Yeah.
to go in and like actually try and figure out what the root cause analysis was. How did these guys even get into like what you're doing? And it's a very complicated environment for a lot of businesses because it's like it's our first time coming in. And if it's our first time coming in, that creates complications and discovery, which makes it so much more expensive than it needs to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned, that they can't do it all, and that's just it. Like, no one company should be an expert in everything, and if they claim to be, I'm very suspicious of it. And I think there's this huge shift right now that I'm seeing with MSPs because we work through a lot of MSPs, and it's a good shift, I think, in where they used to white label everything, and they are doing everything, and now they're saying like, "Hey, listen, these are our trusted third party partners in these different fields." And I just think that's a better way to go about it, in the future is just like, hey, listen, this is the subject matter expert in this piece of the puzzle. Because security, especially and incident response, I mean, those are such niche topics
They
that you
are.
have to live and breathe or else you're not doing it effectively.
Exactly. And I mean, one of the practices that we do on our side, me and my partners, we are constantly looking at like who's the newest threat actor. We've been not going to give any names, but like we've been definitely doing our due diligence on like who's been attacking, what their style of attack is, and we're making sure that we're up to date on the latest strategy, the latest hacks, and then making sure that, we're not necessarily exposing ourselves, but being prepared when someone is exposed to be able to do what needs to be done as quickly as possible. And to focus so heavily on that means there's a lot of things we're not focusing on. Like being an Azure expert, it took me a minute to realize they changed it from Azure AD to Intro. Like it took a
Yeah.
second. But it stuff like that where it's like you need someone hyper focused in that specific niche because when it comes down to it, you need them to act fast. You need someone to know that and to be able to move immediately. There is no, research kind of
Yeah.
like session. It's
This is
just
time.
acting and moving forward.
Yep. No, totally. So I guess like talking about kind of proactive and responding quickly, how does training and simulation, tabletops, things like that, how do those play into the incident response?
It's
Are
more
companies
so.
doing it beforehand or are they pretty much doing it afterward, like when you tell them to?
So for the businesses that we deal with, obviously we want to set them up on, like I said, the security journey where building the disaster recovery plan, being prepared for that. If they're doing it beforehand, it's great, but it's not likely. A lot of these businesses, if they're seeing us, they don't really practice that. But it is important to like have a disaster recovery plan in place to be able to practice like tabletop simulations where, hey, if this does happen, what are we going to do? And it's the same thing with everything that you practice for. You need to be able to do it ahead of time. Like I play competitive Magic the Gathering. I'm not going to go to a tournament without putting some effort of practice beforehand and just try and like win the event without having any kind of experience with it.
Yeah.
It's stupid. It's stupid. And the thing is like it's the same thing with firing a weapon. Like you're not just going to be like, all right, I've never shot this gun before. I'm hoping that the time comes when when I have to shoot it, I know what to do. No, you're gonna go to the range. You're gonna fire it. You're gonna take your clip out at home. Make sure it's
Let
safe,
let
and
alone if
practice
20
shooting.
people are like juggling the gun back and forth between each other and trying to that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah, exactly. So it's like be prepared. Be
Yeah.
prepared in the form of practice, and that's what these tabletop simulations are for. Know your disaster recovery plan. Know what you're gonna do, and implement it. Like literally have a time. My preference is at least like twice a year. Like at the bare minimum, twice a year. Do it in the first half of the year. Do it in the second half of the year. But make sure your team knows what's going on, knows how to handle these situations. Because the thing is, like, the amount of money you're going to lose by not doing this is so much more than the amount of money you're going to lose just taking time outside to practice it. And
Yeah,
I keep
and
coming back to money because it's like I need to
it
speak the
is.
language of the business owner. Like, and that's the language. Like, how much are you going to lose for this? Like, these practices are an investment.
Yeah, and I'll say something that I've seen so often is they'll do tabletops, and
Hmm.
we've probably done it before as well, where we'll have this hour 3 hours blocked for a tabletop exercise, which for anyone listening is basically you all sit at a table or a virtual table, and all right, cyber attack hits, what are we doing, who's responsible, you kind of role play. It's like a
Yep.
simulation of a cyber attack to make sure everyone's aware of roles and responsibilities. And it's so easy because we see a lot of like SOC 2, for example. Any company that's getting SOC 2 done has to show like proof of their tabletop exercise. But a lot
Hmm.
of people throw a couple roles into a doc and don't like truly practice it. And we see that a lot where everyone's like, all right, we're sitting here, all right, you're in charge of this, okay, you're going to tell us, cool, and like they move on because there's 30 other things that they need to do that day. And I'd say like when you block out time for training, I think it's just one of the most important hours of your month or your year. If you're doing it once annual, like take that hour to truly focus on that training and make it meaningful and intentional training. It's the same with like social engineering, like phishing. There's so many
Absolutely.
phishing trainings now where people are just like pushing through the PowerPoint.
Snipping. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's here for a reason, and I get that it's annoying, but it's there for a reason. So like try to really make that training intentional and take the time to learn something from it. And yeah, I mean that it just makes such a huge difference for like so little effort and no money, but it would make a
Absolutely.
huge difference in the response.
And it's building competency. That's all it is. When you do these training courses or events, or when you have like the phishing training stuff, it's not necessarily that you're trying to like repeat and try and drill it into their mind. You want your employees to level up their security competencies. And it's difficult because it is an ever growing field. Like, you're never going to stop seeing new threats. And the problem is our threats are becoming more advanced. They're becoming more clever because AI is leveling up criminals. Everyone thinks AI is great. It's great for business. It's better for criminals. When was the last time you saw a phishing email that was misspelled now?
Yeah.
Exactly. When was the last time you saw a phishing email that didn't look like one of your business partners?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
getting way better at this because the new standard is AI.
Mm-hmm.
We can have private large language models. We don't have to depend on ChatGPT and their ethics to be able to prevent us from and I'm speaking from like the perspective of the hacker, to be able to like get in the way of like how we hack. I can ask a private, AI chatbot, how do I build a effective phishing email attack? And it will tell me because it's private and it doesn't have like an ethics thing to check it. These are the things people don't understand. They think they're protected and that the criminals are like as bad as they used to be. They are way better. They're way more intelligent today than they were 3 years ago.
And I mean, even 3 years ago, we underestimate, like we always
Yeah.
underestimate criminals in general, but hackers specifically, we underestimate them. We think it's this guy in a basement in a hoodie. And so we underestimate him. And that's so false. Like we're so
Yeah.
far as a corporate world, we are very behind hackers. And we need to admit that so that we can, level up. And I think in training specifically, there's always this fear of exposure where you don't want to look like you don't know the answer, but it's like, training is the time to not know the answer and to figure out where
Exactly.
the gaps are. Like, don't cover up gaps. Like, that's the time to expose gaps. And the same thing with penetration testing. We see all the time where, you know, especially if someone like owns a product, there's some like ego involved where like, well, if I get the pen test, it makes me look like I'm not doing my job. And it's like, you're not supposed to be able to hack your own system. Like, there are always
Exactly.
gaps. Like, we don't do our own pen test. We get a third party to come and do us because you can't test your own system. So it's more important to learn in the proactive environment than it is once you're involved.
Live. No.
Yeah.
And trying to run it live is a terrible experience. I've seen a few companies that have not practiced and ran it live, and that's where we come in because it is a competency thing. It's like, okay, well, if you don't know how to navigate your systems, who's gonna?
Yeah.
And even when we come in, we still have to do the discovery on how to navigate your systems. Granted, we are significantly more effective than the average, IT staff, but like it's a huge ordeal to like not be competent in your own system. And to your point with pen testing, don't be ashamed that there are flaws in your environment. Every environment has flaws at some level. And the thing is like, it's because you care about your high, mediums, vulnerabilities, and you haven't attended to all of the lows, and maybe it's a low that gets you compromised. It's hard to determine like what matters and like where you need to put all your effort in. You're not perfect. You're not gonna be perfect, and it's okay. What matters is you're aware. If you are deliberately pleading ignorance constantly and just not trying to like be aware of what the issues are, that is problematic. And that, I would say, is actually one of the biggest risks I've seen to most corporate businesses these days, is the people that aren't willing to expose themselves.
100%.
Especially when it comes to internal stuff.
Ignorance is not bliss in cybersecurity. No. It's not. And, one of the best things a company, especially an enterprise or a Fortune 500 who's in the news after they get hacked, one of the best things for them is to be able to say, listen, we did all the steps. We do this regular training. We get annual penetration tests. We have vulnerability scanning, and the hacker still got in, but we did our due diligence to protect our clients and to make sure we were secure. Like you said, no one is 100% hacker proof.
No.
So you just do the best you can. You take these baby steps, and you're able to, at least on the back end, recover some of that reputation. Even if you have that financial loss, you can at least say like, we take it seriously. This is what we've done in the past. And guess what? This is what we're going to do in the future to be even stronger in this. And you just do the best you can. Yeah.
The PR part is so huge. And it becomes a really important, not necessarily for like the general public, but your clients, your existing clients, the people that are actively doing business with you. And once they find out you're compromised, I promise you they're looking for competitors. They're already trying to replace you. Because the thing is, how can I trust you with the money I send you to fulfill my orders if you can't protect the systems where my information is there? That's a huge problem. And the thing is, you need to be able to reinstill confidence in your existing clients. That's enormous. And it's one of the biggest problems that we see as we're exiting these situations, because the legal ramifications, right? You're still in the legal counsel for quite a minute after we're done, right? You need to talk to your lawyers. They need to iron things out. You got to send letters to everybody. But the thing is, like, you need to also figure out a way to instill confidence in your existing clientele. That's the most important thing that I've noticed so far, is that, like, how do you do that? And your PR response and like what you're going to be doing, what you're saying you're going to be doing, is going to be extremely significant.
Yeah. And talking about protecting existing clients, we see a lot of people that are doing these proactive testing. We're seeing them use that in their sales pitches now. So back to revenue and how, like, we're seeing companies say like, listen, like, we are the most secure XYZ industry company because we're doing this, this, and this. And they're using that as a sales pitch. And we're seeing clients even requiring like large deals and enterprise contracts. Hey, like, what's your proof of last pen test? Or what do you have for your disaster response plan? And clients are getting more strict about requiring that ahead of time. And so I think the more everyone kind of evolves into this culture of not only understanding it's important, because you ask everyone on the street, 100% of people are going to say, yes, cybersecurity is important. Like, we know that.
Yeah.
But is it important enough to be prepared and to be ready? That's a very different question. So absolutely. I guess kind of like wrapping this up, if there's companies out there that are kind of overwhelmed or don't know what to do to prevent this or to be prepared for when an incident response comes, what's your advice for the people listening?
So if you are not prepared and this does end up happening to you, one of the most important things you can do is to at least know who to call, right? For us at Data Pros, we are doing what we can to at least kind of help people in Georgia out. We do travel out to other states to kind of support them, but incident response is not a common industry. It's very difficult. It requires extremely high level skills. So try your best to identify that. Even like locally here at the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce, for us, like, there wasn't an incident response section. Like, they just don't exist. You're going to find MSPs and MSSPs. They don't do that. And it's very hard to kind of find those people. So what I would do is, if you care about this, if you care about security, you need to identify these people. You need to have, who's your cybersecurity insurance, who is your MSP, who is your MSSP, who is your incident response group, and who is your projects group for like future scoping your stuff. If all of those people are defined, you're going to have a good time. If they are not defined, you need to get those people defined as quickly as possible, and get those pieces started for you and your business. Otherwise, it's going to be a very uphill battle. You're going to be scrambling. You're trying to call everybody. It is not the time to try and find somebody when an incident happens. Get that stuff ironed out ahead of time to your best abilities, because you're on a clock. And a lot of the time, it's less than 2 weeks before they release everything. So you really got to restore business continuity, but also deal with the ransom itself.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Samir. This was good. We talked about a lot. Obviously, we're both really passionate about this stuff. I appreciate it. This was really helpful. And if anyone has any questions, we'll have Samir's information in all the posts out to either of us if you have questions. Thanks, Samir. It was great talking today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Bye.